McLaren F1 are back to square one. Since splitting with Honda at the end of 2017, they had a plan to make their way back to the front of the field. But in stark contrast to the other British team on the grid, the working squad have failed to capitalise on the new regulations. Here's a chart showing McLaren's championship position over the past 5 years. As you can see, they were on a steady incline ever since Zak Brown took over as the CEO of McLaren Racing. From no podiums in 2018 to their first with Carlos Sainz in 2019. Then a further 2 podiums in 2020, and most famously, their win with Daniel Ricciardo in Monza 2021. That season also saw them more than double their podium count from the previous year. But in this sport, success is never guaranteed. Just because they were on the rise doesn't automatically mean you're going to flourish in a new era with radically different cars. 2022 was a tough year all round for them, with their only podium finish coming very early on in the season. And when you look at their achievements compared to previous years, they've almost perfectly regressed back to where they were in 2019. Now obviously, you have to factor in variables like Ricciardo being out of form, so these stats don't do the 2022 car justice. Put Sainz back alongside Norris that year, and they would have finished ahead of Alpine, I'm sure of it. But for the most part, it was a toss-up between them and Alpine as the 4th and 5th fastest cars. The same was true for 19 and 20, where they were often fighting the likes of Renault and Racing Point. McLaren managed to break out of that cycle in 2021 when they were competing with Ferrari for 3rd in the Constructors. And considering the title fight that was going on, I expected them to make the same performance jump as the Scuderia. In fact, at the time, I thought they'd actually be contending for the title while Mercedes and Red Bull spent the year recovering. Ever since, that race, the race where Lando came agonizingly close to winning his first race in Formula 1, things started to go wrong. After 2 races back-to-back fighting for wins on merit, they started a steady decline towards the end of the year, one that continued into 2022. The MCL36 can only be described as inconsistent and unpredictable. Their troubles started with their front brakes getting cooked at the season opener, forcing them to spend resources on designing new ones. This only further hindered them in figuring out how to get the car into the optimal working window. Like most other teams, they struggled finding the right middle ground between downforce and balance. They were forced to sacrifice either speed for worse drivability or vice versa. It looked like they had a couple of breakthroughs in places like Australia and Imola, but those were very much track dependent and masked by Norris's abilities behind the wheel. And if I'm being honest, the clock is ticking with Lando. If McLaren continue making false promises, I don't see him staying very long. Question is, where would he go? Well, there are a number of top teams that would definitely sign him, but the current state of affairs simply won't allow for it. Let me know where you think Norris could go if he were to leave McLaren down in the comments. Also, while you're at it, drop the video a like if you're enjoying, to help out with our algorithm. Because on YouTube, it's the key to success, just like James is for McLaren. No, you didn't like that? Yeah, neither did I. But this man, James Key, made some interesting comments last year. As technical director, he's the one overseeing car development, so for any McLaren fans who want to pin the blame on someone for their poor car, it's him. As flawed as their concept was last year, however, their development was very strong. They managed to redeem themselves as the season went on, once they figured out how to get the best out of the car. Sure, it had its limitations, but at least they salvaged somewhat of a decent result out of it, and many lessons to carry into 2023. Therefore, it stands to reason that their start to this season would be a lot better.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
Yeah, technical issues plagued them in Bahrain, and alas, Lando ended up 2 laps down on the eventual race winner, Max Verstappen. McLaren expected they would be on the back foot going into it, so they weren't necessarily that shocked at the pace they had. I mean, without the issue, there could have been a chance at points given Norris was starting from 11th, but ultimately, their unreliability set them back, which is never a good sign when a season is just beginning. Don't worry though, there is hope. Their new team principal Andrea Stella said there's an upgrade scheduled for Baku, so all their problems will be resolved now, right? Well, one firstly has to consider the fact that other teams are also bringing upgrades. So the amount of performance gained needs to offset that of their rivals in order for them to jump up the competitive ladder. But secondly, and more importantly, the only reason why they're hyping up this upgrade package so much is actually because they took the wrong development direction while working on this car. They realized quite late on that there was a better alternative to improving aerodynamic efficiency, a key area of weakness they suffered with last year. That's why there was all this talk about them expecting to be on back foot going into Bahrain. The car they currently have isn't the specification they expect to be competitive, but as I said, it's not like the other teams are standing still. There's a lot of risk in banking on this one upgrade to magically launch them into the top 4. Because right now, I don't see them doing that against Mercedes, Ferrari, or Aston Martin. And in a midfield that's as close as it is, they might find themselves in trouble if it doesn't bring the performance they're hoping for. Now obviously, it's still too early to tell, so I'm not going to be all doom and gloom here. But I am going to quote Lando, because what he says is exactly the way I feel about the situation. As much as we want to believe the season maybe starts later, it's starting now, and we're behind where we should want to be. I couldn't agree more. And while we're on the topic, I might as well say what I truly feel. I've always wanted McLaren to do well. They were the team I supported growing up, when they had a car capable of winning races. But as good as those cars were, there also came a lot of dysfunction, which held them back quite a lot. There was always potential that was never truly fulfilled at any points. Talk is always cheap unless you back it up with actions and results. It's one of the reasons Lewis left in 2012, and when that happened, everything went off the rails. I mentioned this in another video, but Ron Dennis's leadership didn't help either. And although in recent years that hasn't been an issue, and the managerial structure has changed significantly, there still seems to be an element of giving excuses to a certain degree. I'll give you an example. Key pointed out some potential issues with their wind tunnel that influenced their flawed 2022 car. So what's up with the wind tunnel they were supposed to have completed last year? Well, due to the pandemic, the development program was delayed. Okay, so when will it be completed? They say by the end of this season. So really the only cars that will reap the benefits from it will be in 2024 and 2025. Alright, fair enough. I'm not employed to understand all the intricate little details that go into constructing state-of-the-art facilities, so I'm not mad at that. But in my humble opinion, I feel as though it's deflecting from the real problem, which is McLaren having a weaker technical department relative to the bigger teams. In my view, this is where they should be looking to improve the most. It's all well and good having the best tools at your disposal, but if you don't have the right people to extract the maximum from them, you've still got a problem. I don't know, maybe I'm being harsh, and I'll be proven wrong 2 to 3 years down the line. One thing I can give them credit for though, is how much better they've been operationally. Far too often would McLaren lose races due to poor strategy calls and bad pit stops during the early 2010s. At least now, they're one of the better teams when it comes to these two aspects, so in a tight midfield battle, it could prove crucial. But to do that, you've got to be in the fight in the first place, and right now, they aren't. In recent years, they've also been given plaudits for their working environment within the garage. They struck the perfect match with Carlos and Lando as their driver lineup, and generally, the vibe amongst the engineers is a lot friendlier, if you could call it that. But until they start getting their act together, stuff like that is just smoke and mirrors. What I really want to see from them this year is real progress with their in-season development. When you have a team like Aston Martin that can jump from way lower down the grid order to genuinely being amongst the top 4, you start to raise questions about your own processes. Maybe the development direction they found at the end of last year is what Aston found near the very beginning. There's a lot of inspiration the MCL36 has taken from the Red Bull, therefore I wouldn't be surprised if what they stumbled upon was something similar. But at this point, we know one thing is for certain, they have a damn long way to go. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and drop a like, share it around with your friends, and subscribe to the channel with bell notifications to keep up to date with my latest videos in the future. Let me know how you think McLaren will fare in the upcoming races, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.